we're going to start tonight's event. And my name's Ron Shishido. I'm from Dillon Consulting, and I'm the project manager for this zoning and urban design project. So we're here to welcome you to this public engagement session number 1 for Rethink Zoning and the creation of the next generation zoning bylaw for Central Elgin. So it's a landmark project. So we're holding this hybrid workshop, and again, this is our first hybrid workshop with simultaneous in-person and virtual discussions. So before we get moving, I'm going to call on Lloyd Perrin, to provide some introductory comments from Central Elgin.
Great, thanks, Ron. I probably don't need the microphone, but if you can't hear me, just raise your hand. But first of all, welcome, and thank you very much for giving up some of your time this evening. I know it's a nice night out and we're into the summer, but we do appreciate your support and your input on this project. It is a monumental project for the municipality of Central Elgin because it's going to take us into, we'll say, more of a modern zoning bylaw that is going to be more easily understood by the public, and you're not going to need a legal degree to be able to decipher it, get through it. It's intended to be public facing, so it will be up on our website in the future. And we do really value your input this evening. So with me tonight is the Dillon team, and they'll introduce themselves. But from council is Councillor Morgan Halpin from Ward 2. And then a number of the Central Elgin planning staff as well. So, again, thank you very much for your time. And as we go through the process, there will be a page on our community engagement page. Let's Talk Central Elgin. We would encourage everyone to go there for up-to-date information, provide feedback. There's people that will be able to get that information back to you if you have questions, or let you know where the process is at. And that's how we will be communicating about the milestones of the project. So, okay, thank you very much.
So what are we covering tonight? Well, first thing I'm going to do is introduce the project team, a number of which are sitting at the tables. They're going to be acting as facilitators, as well as people at the front. We will be migrating to the tables for discussion. But firstly, we're going to give you a brief presentation to give you some context for tonight's workshop. Justine, who's sitting here, will provide an overview of the zoning bylaw and urban design project. Then Justine and Martina Bronstein, she's the urban design lead, will provide some update on some technical lessons learned that we have found from our work to date. We're then also going to cover some next steps. And the reason why you're saying, well, why are you going to the next steps? That's usually at the end. It's because we're doing this hybrid in-person and virtual workshop. So that part, the next steps, will then be the break point between the discussion groups in this room and the virtual discussion group that's set up. And you can see Nicole Buckley, and she's our engagement lead. There she's up there. Hey, wave, Nicole. There she is. And she's going to be facilitating the virtual workshop. We'll be reconvening around 7:50 for a wrap-up. This session is scheduled from 6:15 to 8 o'clock. So this project is a hands-on collaboration involving staff from Central Elgin, the Central Elgin Planning Office, and Dillon. The Central Elgin team is led by Lloyd Perrin and Jeff Brooks, and Lloyd's here. The Central Elgin Planning Office team includes Kevin McClure, who's the Central Elgin planner. Wave your hand, Kevin. There he is. And Jim McComb. Where's Jim? There he is, Jim. as well as Steve Craig, Mike Noon, and Alistair McLean. And then the Dillon team, Dillon's the prime consultant. Oh, there we go. It's not, that's why it's not clicking. You guys are playing with the machine. So Dillon's the prime consultant for the project, and our team represents a blend of project experience in applying current best practices, the use of innovative tools, as well as local knowledge. This collaboration of skills, knowledge, and experience from Central Elgin, the Central Elgin Planning Office in Dillon, will ensure that the zoning bylaw and urban design guidelines project meets the needs of yourselves, the community of Central Elgin, and it's delivered on time. So what are zoning bylaws and urban design guidelines? There we go. So zoning is a regulatory tool that defines what you can and you can't do on your property. Zoning bylaws implement the rules set out in the Planning Act for regulating development on all lands. And in this province, everything is driven by acts, statutory legislation, and they set the rules for everything that we do. A zoning applies to the development of new buildings, as well as when you want to make an addition to an existing building. The zoning bylaw sets out the uses, the specific uses permitted on a lot, the lot frontage and depth, where a building or structure can be located on your lot, the size of the lots, buildings and structures, building height and density, parking and loading facilities, as well as setbacks for buildings and structures from your front, side, and rear lot lines on your lot. So zoning bylaws do not regulate certain things on your lot, such as internal configuration of space within a building, or architectural elements such as external materials and styles, as well as landscaping and building appearance. And this is where they bring in other tools that municipalities use, such as design guidelines and site plan, as well as activities under the building code. So urban design guidelines are a tool that provide guidance for design and placemaking considerations for development on private and public lands. Urban design guidelines are used to help you understand what a municipality is looking for with regards to the look of a building or landscape it's doing. Now, urban design guidelines do not regulate the use of lands. They provide guidance on how you can achieve a desired design vision, but they cannot regulate design. And again, that's by statutory legislation. They're not regulatory tools, and they're also not mandatory. But as you will see through our presentation, that there are very many different ways how we can apply all these different tools to achieve a desired end for urban design. So how does zoning and urban design work together? So as I said before, zoning bylaws determine what uses are permitted on a lot. Urban design guidelines are used to guide the development on the lot to meet the design goals of the community. And those design goals are set out in the official plan. Urban design guidelines cover specific identified zones in the zoning bylaw and uses within those zones, while the zoning bylaw covers the whole municipality. And again, reinforcing urban design guidelines are not zoning requirements, but they work in tandem with your official plan and your zoning bylaw as part of the project planning and development review and approvals process. So how does the zoning bylaw and urban design guidelines impact you? There's no change for existing uses, so they can continue as is on your property. Where the new zoning bylaw and design guidelines make it in is when you're proposing changes to uses and or buildings on your property. So it's through the development process. Oops. That I'm only looking at Justine because I did her slides. Sorry about that. So, okay, so about the project. Project purpose, to create a new zoning bylaw and companion urban design guidelines to implement the 2022 Central Elgin official plan. So you remember that Central Elgin is really still a newly amalgamated municipality. Their first generation plan was approved in 2013, and now the second generation plan has been was approved in 2022. So it's really a generational OP for this new municipality, and now you're going to have a zoning bylaw that's generational as well. So the new zoning bylaw, it's going to provide a contemporary and flexible set of rules for regulating development. It's going to be more clear, concise, and modern. So really what that means is that non-planners can really understand quickly what a zoning bylaw means. You go there, you look at the bylaw, it's going to tell you what you need to know. It's going to be visual. It's going to be graphical. It's not all just mumbo jumbo of words and numbers. It's going to provide you with something that you really need. It's going to provide an appropriate balance between regulation and flexibility. And that's very important. Regulation is required and mandated through the Planning Act. Everything we do is through legislation. But flexibility is also important so that people, businesses, municipality can actually make decisions in a way that can be done more quickly. Still meets the legislation, but it's done more quickly. And lastly, going to replace the 3 existing municipal bylaws with a single new bylaw that covers the entire municipality. As you know, since the establishment of Central Elgin, been working under the Yarmouth bylaw, the Belmont bylaw, and the Port Stanley bylaw. So now you're going to have one brand new bylaw. So the purpose of the urban design guidelines, these guidelines will apply to selected areas and zones across the municipality. They're going to reflect the vision and goals for urban design in the official plan. So again, that's very important. Guidelines, they work hand in hand with planning policy in your official plan and with regulation in the zoning. They're going to be principles based. Those principles will be laid out in the official plan, and they're going to provide high-level guidance for urban design in the public and private realm. So public realm, when we say public realm, that's like a planner word. What we're talking about within road right-of-ways, that's lands owned by government, and on government property. Municipal land, that's public realm. And private realm, that's yourselves, that's myself, Floyd, everybody. Our own properties where we live, privately owned land. So the project process and timeline, the project's divided into 3 stages. Stage 1 kicked off in March of this year, and we're nearing completion of stage 1, and that's review and analysis. So what's going to happen is the information, the comments, the insights that we receive from yourselves, you're like our sounding board in terms of what is important to the community in terms of how the zoning tool will work and how the guidelines work. Stage 2, and that's where we'll be focusing on preparing the draft zoning bylaw and urban design guidelines. We plan on being completed by the end of June 2024. That's in the approved work plan. And then stage 3, following statutory public meeting where the final document will be presented to the public at a council meeting. Then hopefully then it'll be completed. And that's the end of March. But I forgot one important thing, and that is the draft zoning bylaw and draft urban design guidelines will be presented to yourselves. There'll be a public open house. There'll be workshops. You can do sticky notes, fill out comment forms. We have comment forms there. So you can, if you forget something, you can take the comment form and then mail it. But so what I'm saying is there's still a lot of time for consultation. And as well, Kevin McClure, who's the project manager for Central Elgin Planning Office on this project. Later on in the slide, you'll see his email, and he welcomes all comments that you have. You just send it to him and he will catalog it and then circulate it to the team, and we'll respond to those comments. Okay, now background analysis and lessons learned. I'll call on Justine, who will talk about zoning, and Martina, who will talk about urban design guidelines.
Thanks, Ron. So these slides I can present, right? Yeah, okay. Fantastic. So planning in the province is regulated by a top-down structure. So when we look at zoning, it's important to understand the policy framework that we work within. There's provincial policy direction through the provincial policy statement and the Planning Act that provides guidance to what municipalities can and can't do, how they can use tools to regulate growth. That provides direction to the county in terms of the county official plan. And under that sits the municipal official plan that then provides land use designations, policies for where the growth is going to go in the long term. That informs any kind of neighborhood level planning, which we also refer to as secondary planning. And then zoning bylaw and urban design guidelines really fit in that implementation phase. So they're taking those policies from those higher level plans and really implementing them through land use regulations and guidelines at the lot fabric level. So it covers the entire municipality, including all settlement areas, hamlets, agricultural areas, and employment areas. And will implement both the county official, the municipal official plan, as well as the Port Stanley Harbor secondary plan for those lands. And it really establishes those rules of development that Ron was mentioning earlier. So as you know, there's 3 zoning bylaws that currently are in force and effect within the municipality. And the project will prepare a new zoning bylaw to replace the existing zoning bylaws. Those existing zoning bylaws date back to 1968. And we think it's time for a refresh there. There's a number of existing regulations that are out of date, and there's a need to update those regulations as it relates to the official plan policies and making sure that they conform to that. So I'll go through some of the lessons learned from other municipalities, as well as from working with the municipal planning staff to really think about what's working well right now with the regulations and where are there opportunities for improvement that we really want to focus our efforts on as it relates to the zoning bylaw, the new zoning bylaw for the municipality. So one of the things is that we are looking at updating the zones themselves. So if you were to look at the three zoning bylaws right now, you would see that there's different zone categories in each one of them. They reflect a moment in time and the thoughts at that time. And there is a desire to have some consistency, as well as to ensure that these zones implement the official plan designations. So as such, we will be looking at some properties may have just a new zoning name for something that's fundamentally very much the same. Others we're going to be looking at, given the direction that the official plan provides, we'll actually be looking at a different zone that better reflects the future desires of that property. Overall, the desire is to reduce the number of zones within Central Elgin, and while still carrying over site-specific permissions as required. If you've ever looked at a zoning bylaw, you might notice that they're typically black and white, text heavy, and you may feel like you need a legal degree to be able to read them. What we're seeing is that there is a desire and aspiration to use more diagrams, clearer language, accessible tables, and guides, whether videos and other tools, to help make these documents more accessible to members of the public, to developers who use this tool, and also to staff, so that we have consistent application and interpretation. So the peer review identified some successes by others in terms of using tables, diagrams, and how to communicate regulations with more clear language. And this goes right from the structure of the bylaw all the way down to the specific regulations in it. So that's something we'll be looking at through the new zoning bylaw as well. One of the other kind of major points of consideration is how the approach for zoning overall. So right now, zoning in North America, most municipalities use something we consider Euclidean zoning. And what that means is a single use zone. So primarily, we are preparing zoning that separates land uses and types and has fairly detailed specificity to that. So a category might have then subcategories under it. Let's take commercial, for example. You might have a commercial zone and then a specific zone for small retail, large retail, office use, and you can see the approach there. And so one of the things that we're looking at is there an opportunity to look at when is the right way to use form instead of this kind of Euclidean approach. And so form-based zoning, the concept is that we regulate the type of land use, but not we regulate, sorry, the form instead of the type of land use. And so, for instance, we could be looking at a general building envelope on a site. We think about the setback, the connection with the street that we want to achieve, and we worry less about what's inside the built form itself. And so this is one of the things that is being explored as it relates to the need for greater flexibility in our residential permissions and to meet the official plan housing goals. One of the other things that we are looking at is around the bylaw and how to reduce the need for consistent minor variances that are coming up. So when we look at the three bylaws that are currently in place, over the years that they have been in place, we've had over just under 700 exemptions or amendments to those zoning bylaws that have come up because the type of built form is not quite fitting within the zone or regulations that it currently exists. And so what we're looking at when we establish a new zoning bylaw is, are there opportunities for flexibility? What are the core things that we want to control because it's critical to control? And where can we add some of that flexibility to reduce the need for minor variances going forward? So that's also one consideration that is going into this. And then lastly, we want to look at the definitions and general provisions. Similar to some of the other points, the three current zoning bylaws each have different definitions and general provisions, given that they have come about over time, produced by different people. And there is a desire now to look at some consistency in how we look at general provisions and definitions across the municipality. And so that's one other opportunity for increased clarity and consistency that we'll be looking at further. And so with that, I'll hand it off to Martina to go through some of the key objectives of the urban design guidelines.
Thank you so much. So when we speak about the urban design guidelines, we are going to be looking at municipal-wide guidelines. And as all of you are aware, and I'm sure you all come from different communities within Central Elgin, that there really is something very unique about your municipality. There are rural settlement areas, urban settlement areas, and hamlets that make up a very interesting and at times also challenging approach to ensuring that every community and that that as a municipality as a whole, that there's sort of a unified vision of what falls under urban design. There are also really interesting adjacencies where we have communities sharing almost backyards to City of St. Thomas, sometimes also having maybe more identity or feeling like they're really part of City of St. Thomas and not Central Elgin because of the services, the trails, and the infrastructure that is adjacent to their communities. There are also communities that are sort of clustered and maybe more auto or car oriented. And so there's sort of an interesting opportunity to think about how do we ensure that every element or every community within the municipal boundary, there's things that are standard that apply to all sort of standard principles, which we'll talk in a minute. That's sort of the overall vision and the approach. And then what elements, and that's something I'd like you to think about as well, but what elements actually are the ones that are character defining for each community, where urban design guidance can actually support and strengthen the different placemaking components or things that maybe you would like to see improve. Maybe it's not there currently, and it's something that you'd like to see in the next decade or two. Further, as the municipality grows, we also know that there will be changes. We need to expect changes in the community, the diversity of the built form, the heights, and there needs to be this holistic approach, and application of urban design guidance really becomes a critical component, making sure that the development meets the standards of what today is considered good community design, and sort of working towards communities that are more sustainable, that are more complete communities, that look at the proximity and connection to natural heritage, which you are blessed with in your municipality, that look at cultural heritage components, and as well as the sort of conservation and adding on to the historical references that are already built in the landscape. And then there's sort of as well the unique, for such a municipality, there is that unique window into Lake Erie and the waterfront and the shoreline, the harbor, and that is identified as one of the many sort of identifiers in the community. So we have looked at sort of the policies, the new official plan, and some of the strategic directions that where are we all going? Where is Central Elgin? What are you thriving to be? So in translation of what that overall vision is for the community, we've taken a stab as a preliminary vision of what it actually, how it translates in terms of urban design. So I'm just going to read it. So the municipality of Central Elgin will embrace, protect, and celebrate the unique identities of each community nestled within the rural, historic, and natural landscapes that interface with the Lake Erie shoreline through design guidance that responds to the needs of the growing and vibrant community. Both public and private realm will be shaped by design excellence that supports sustainability, equity, accessibility, placemaking, and resiliency. There will be an activity where we're going to pull up that vision slide again, and there will be some discussion, and we want to really kind of tear it apart. We can cross out words, add new words. What is as a preliminary vision for urban design of the community? What have we gotten right, and where can we actually add or edit components of that statement? The next component that I'd like to discuss with you are our urban design principles. So we've set urban design principles, which I noted earlier, really start to more formally sort of highlight the key priorities coming from that vision statement. Okay, so this is our statement, but really what are sort of the key principles that we're going to abide so that every guideline under, let's say, if we're looking in the commercial zones or if we're looking in residential zones, that these apply regardless. These are sort of our critical direction forward that has to be applied through the lens of each, down the line site plan application, for example. So what we have there are really principles around placemaking, principles around sustainable development, walkable neighborhoods. So placemaking really is about the creation of that visually distinct and identifiable community, having communities and the development that supports that and contributes to a sense of place. And there is a community pride that respects and embraces the character of the various communities, and then as a community as a whole. So there needs to be the placemaking of the municipality as one, and then understanding that there are other layers that really provide that richness. There's sustainable development, promoting efficient and cost-effective development, minimizing land consumption, using green infrastructure, and having the principles and the guidelines that provide pedestrian-friendly streets. And then at the sort of the next one is walkable neighborhoods, which speaks to fostering walkable neighborhoods that have streetscapes and focal points and destinations that really tie the community together. If we don't have a reason or don't feel safe or don't feel protected or don't feel there isn't a desired path to go from location or point A or B, we're likely going to go into our car. If there are things along the way that actually impact our interest, that is it gives you a sense of place that you're proud of, maybe some trees, benches and other streetscape components, it actually does make more walkable communities. That kind of contributes to the next set, which is completing complete communities, having a mix of land uses, again, which engages more pedestrian activity, encompassing various housing types, parks, commercial areas, and opportunities really within those community designs. Having and promoting the public spaces. So public spaces could be the streetscapes, it could be civic spaces, parks, it could be trail systems, it could be anything that is under the municipality's ownership, and having it be accessible and safe, inclusive, and we often say universal design, which is having people with varying abilities be able to access those spaces as well, which is really sort of a critical, it is a critical expectation now in our field to have spaces designed for all. Natural and cultural heritage conservation, it is, as I mentioned sort of in my introduction, the municipality really thrives in the various cultural heritage elements historic references, and then also the natural heritage system, the valley system, as well as the shoreline. And there needs to be emphasis through the various guidance for each development to consider that and how to protect those assets. We have traditional community character, which I sort of noted, which really looks at the traditional street patterns, and that really also connects or correlates to more walkable communities, and having the streetscape of high quality, which really comes, and this is where it comes really hand in hand with zoning, where you have, the massing of the building, the setbacks, and how does that play into what your experience is along the street. I will hand it over to Ron to talk about the next steps.
Thanks, Martina. So what are the next steps for this project? As I mentioned earlier, stage 2, getting down to preparing the draft zoning bylaw and urban design guidelines, the public open house in January, reviewing of the comments with yourselves, with the stakeholders, as well as other public members of the public, government agencies. Central Elgin staff will be taking all the comments and reviewing them in a matrix table format, and then making some recommendations back to Central Elgin, they'll including council. And from that, we'll be getting direction, and we'll prepare the final documents for the zoning bylaw and the urban design guidelines. We'll be doing that in February 2024, and then presenting the documents at a statutory public meeting, and then again, all comments to Kevin. So this is kind of the break point. And you'll see Kevin's, there's Kevin KM McClure, stthomas.ca. Now, the other important element there is the project updates and the Let's Talk Central Elgin / Rethink zoning. That is a really important piece of information or platform for you. You can gain access to it anytime you want at home on your laptop. And we will be providing information to the municipality. It'll be uploaded, and you can keep in constant monitoring of what we're doing and where we're at. And then if you see something that you want to make a comment on, then you send Kevin an email.